in Kentucky, where we had an article today from Kyle Tucker, Kentucky's beat writer over at The Athletic, a very in-depth article that sort of hints at some of the tensions that lie underneath the surface in the Kentucky basketball program right now, some in-depth stuff on Cal's relationship with Mitch Barnhart, the Kentucky athletic director. So let's just sort of step back and I'll throw it out broadly to you guys, because I believe all three of us had a chance to look through this article and read it and digest it a little bit. T.O., what was your big reaction to some of the news from this article?
I'm a little shocked that the AD of a major basketball university like the University of Kentucky the way it read is really riding the coattails of the football coach, which I understand. Football in the SEC, that's your money getter. I understand all that, but this is the University of Kentucky. This is a basketball school. I don't care who quoted what. It's a basketball school. I know Calipari got in a little bit of sauce saying that in passing, but at the same time, I hate the way that this goes a little bit, and it's all because of the dollar. Because Kentucky has been better in football, and the lack of loyalty to the head basketball coach of that university, who's been to several Final Fours, who's won a national championship for that university. For him, even though he's pulling together funds for his program, is being turned down. It doesn't make sense. What are you trying to do? What platform do you stand on? That's kind of where it was questionable for me as to the AD's approach. That was the biggest question.
Yeah, Laval, what's that sort of relationship, right? Like, is this just a politics thing that every coach has to play with administration, or is this unique to the Kentucky situation and who John Calipari is?
Yeah, without being there, I don't know. Greg, it's hard when you're a coach because you don't know. We're not in the meetings, we're not in the room, the conversation. There's a ton of dialogue, planning, communication that goes on, across to try to get get done what you need to get done to be as good as you can be as a program, and that's so. I don't know. Kyle Tucker, in terms of how much knowledge he had and who he got, what his sources are. But I do know alignment is important, from president to AD to coach, all the way through in terms of, how good you can be and what the potential is of the program, what the vision is, where things stand. Sometimes the president, isn't like fully in on athletics. That makes a difference in terms of what you're allowed to do or what you're trying to accomplish. Alignment's important within the department. Look, the sports have to get along. If you're in a situation where you're sharing with other sports, you're sharing a building or a facility, or so kind of all those things matter because it just gives you something else to think about other than coaching your team. And so you want to be aligned. That's for sure.
I'm intrigued by the timing of this article, right? Because a lot of what I read in this piece does not seem to have festered in the last 24 hours, but I have to imagine there's some reasoning and some strategy to the fact that it's now coming out when Cal's having some struggles on the basketball court after losing earlier this week. But I mean,
there is something to be said there. Cal's a PR master. There's something to be said there.
Right. If you want to go like tinfoil hat here, T.O., which is a game I definitely play a good amount, right?
That's where you thrive, Greg.
I thrive in deciphering the hidden meaning behind the hidden meaning here. But like, I don't know, man. The timing caught me off guard. I think none of this is like a big surprise, right? When you come public calling this a basketball school and you have sort of the public, the football coach needs to address the statements from the basketball coach thing. Like that doesn't happen at every single university, even if it's happening behind closed doors. And at Kentucky, it did not happen behind closed doors. So I think there was a lot leading up to today's piece coming out that maybe Cal could have done differently, and now it's sort of biting him in the butt. But the other piece of this article that was really fascinating to me, and Laval, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, but it really kind of put the Kentucky staff as a whole on blast. It questioned, the successful teams Cal has had in the past really had some guys who were responsible for scouting, for game planning, for breaking down film, and that was their MO. And they've departed the staff. There's been new replacements who are primarily here to just go get the best players in the country, which Cal has always done a good job at. And maybe some of those other elements of putting together game plans and preparing for games themselves have fallen wayside. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that. One, just how difficult is it assembling a staff in today's day and age, keeping a staff together, especially at a program like Kentucky? And then how much can you really pinpoint some of these failures or these troubles on, the guys on this Kentucky staff?
Yeah, I know we were talking prior to the show, in football and they get the coordinators and then you let the coordinator go, if the offense is bad or the defense is bad. In basketball, you don't get to do that as much because it all falls on you as the head coach. And I know this, I would say having just kind of watched, like when your staff turns over, it's difficult. I've gone through that. And because when you first get a job, you have that vision in mind and that group. Even when you look back, I think about when Matt Painter in Purdue was really good, and Robbie Hummel, who's on here, Robbie and Jawan Johnson, Etwan Moore. But then when Rick Ray got a head job, and then Quanzo Martin got a head job, and Paul Lusk got a head, he lost those guys. It took a dip, and then Purdue came back up because those were three, head coaches in the making. Really good staff, and they worked well together. And so that things matter. The synergy matters. And so as your staff turns over, I think that is something that I've dealt with in trying to, you don't know everybody. You knew the guys really well in the first take. When those guys move on, and you want them to move on, you want them to, you want everybody, you want all the players to, be good enough and their dream and live their dream and go play in the NBA. You want all the assistants to, live their dream and become head coaches. But when the turnover happens now, I think the filtering and the hiring and all the process that you go through to pick it's a challenge. Just especially when you're like, I don't hang out with a lot of people. I got a small group, and like, I know that group really well. So when I got to go outside of that group, now you're leaning on other people as references and things like that. And that becomes, a challenge.
The big thing is I'm going to speak in generalities here, but not necessarily towards Kentucky, even though we've talked about their antiquated offense a little bit and how they're not teaching angles correctly and yada, yada, yada. We've talked about this stuff, right? My dad, rest in peace, he always told me, and he had some success in the nursing home industry and climbed for a long time. And he always told me, if I'm the smartest guy in a room, I'm in the wrong room. And sometimes the guy that's at the top doesn't necessarily have to be the smartest guy, but he has to be the guy that can pull everybody together and then use their
strengths. Need the smartest room is the way it goes. Like, hey,
right. Like,
I don't have to be the smartest guy in there. We just got to have the smartest room.
And you have to be able to hold those guys together, right? Like, you have to be able to hold those guys' strengths to each other, even if they counterbalance each other sometimes and they bump heads. I feel like Cal, just from how he acts in press conferences, he's always the smartest guy in a room. So like, you have to, as a coach, or not, and I'm not critiquing Cal, I'm speaking in generalities, but like, you have to, as a coach, create an atmosphere of almost combativeness to where, like, guys, if you think something's wrong, you have to speak up, because there can't be some kind of groupthink. And I'm not sure any of his three assistants are big, boisterous guys on the floor, because if you ever go and watch a Kentucky game in person, I've seen a limited amount, admittedly, but Cal's the only person coaching. There's nobody else saying anything. And I think that's a big part of it. And the dribble drive offense, it's ran its course a little bit. Who's going to be that next guy that's going to help you move it forward? And along those lines, in that article, Kentucky, the source complained about Kentucky's lack of personnel, which I thought was a little crazy, considering their staff was a little bit smaller than some of the others in the SEC. I thought that was nonsense. Like, you have to figure out the right blend of guys. And, he's got some great recruiting talent on that coaching staff. Who is your next, real X's and O's coach guy? Like Bruiser's longtime assistant, done a great job at his job. Some of these other guys like, Antigua, Chin Coleman, like those are great recruiting pieces. Like, who are those guys? And I'm not saying they can't coach, but they're known for recruiting. Who are those guys that are going to step up and kind of fill those gaps where Calipari's at? And is Calipari going to let him fill those gaps?